Welcome to the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce.
The Falmouth Chamber is dedicated to working on behalf of our members to make Falmouth a better place to live, work, and conduct business. We are committed to developing the economic, cultural, educational, and civic interests of our community and welcome the support from all organizations to achieve our combined goals. Whether you call Falmouth home, are a summer resident, or a visitor, we hope you take advantage of all that the Chamber has to offer.
Hi, I'm Bob from Crane Appliance. Since 1983, as a family-owned company, our goal has been simple: to give our neighbors of the Cape and Islands a great shopping experience. Rest easy knowing our professional team will listen to your needs and help you pick out the perfect appliances. We'll take care of everything throughout the sale, delivery, and installation process. And we even have our own in-house service department. Crane Appliance, we call the Cape and Islands home.
Carlson Printing for all your printing needs. 508-548-7303 or toll free at 1-800-696-7303. Our email address is carlsonprinting@aol.com. Carlson Printing for all your printing needs.
Hosting services for fctv.org are provided by MegaNet Communications. MegaNet offers a wide array of internet services including Mega Backup Cloud Service, server co-location, T1, fiber, Metro Ethernet, as well as telephone services such as hosted PBX and digital voice. Their number one goal is to keep your communications network up and running and allow you to focus on growing your business. 877-634-2638 or meganet.net.
I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Falmouth Select Board. It is Saturday, October 1st. This is a strategic planning meeting. We will workshop the strategic plan and we will entertain no public comment. And I will turn it over to Mr. Johnson-Staub to review his budget priorities memo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the message in the memo that I provided to the board for today's meeting identifies the revenue context. The fiscal position of the town remains very strong, but that said, as is typical in most years, the new revenue that will be generated primarily by the tax levy and any new growth in local revenues, most of it will be needed to maintain a level services budget, existing positions, wage rate increases, inflationary pressures on contractual services and the like. So what I have outlined is, at this early stage in the budgeting process, I would suggest that any new positions or new initiatives beyond a level services budget be limited to approximately $300,000 to $350,000. And that is a number that will come into finer focus as we move through the budget development process, with requests being submitted by the departments so that we, as I get a better picture on exactly what those costs are for the level services budget, and as we get further into this fiscal year and get a better sense of what the most recent revenue trends are, I will be able to refine that number in terms of what we can sustain for new expenditure growth. So with that revenue context, I know the board is well aware that the biggest challenge you'll face this year, or the biggest decision that you face, is addressing the select board's policy goal to staff 6 fire stations. You have a memo from Chief Smith which identifies essentially the minimum number of additional hires that will be needed in order to sustainably staff 6 fire stations. And I do want to caveat, even with the recommended minimum new hires, that there are always going to be a lot of variables that are not under our control in terms of the hiring process and how quickly we can hire firefighters in terms of forecasting retirements and resignations, medical leaves, and military leaves. So there, as we've discussed before, in order to staff all of the stations and have a sustainable plan, we have multiple tools, multiple areas that we need to work on, one of which is hiring additional firefighters, and another is looking at the minimum shift provisions in the union contract. And we are in the process of bargaining a change to get to 16 firefighters at the start of shift. That is needed in order to guarantee that we staff 5 stations on a daily basis. In order to staff 6 stations on a daily basis, we would need 18 firefighters at the start of shift.
May I ask a question? So the conversation about going to 16, is that within the budget limitations now?
So we currently, as you know, our policy is we have in the contract 14 minimum start of shift, but we are offering overtime availability to get to 16 at the start of shift.
Okay.
And the staffing on any given day, sometimes we actually get to 16 without overtime, and we're getting there most of the time recently, and often there is 1 or 2 of the slots are filled on an overtime basis. So to answer your question, we have an overtime budget of $700,000, and that has been purposely set for many years below what the actual overtime is going to be, partly because we don't know, it's hard to predict exactly what the overtime is going to be, and we have been successful over these many years funding the gap with free cash. So I apologize for the long-winded answer, but the full answer to your question is that $700,000 overtime budget is not going to be sufficient without any change to the contract, without any change to the current staffing plan. We will go over that $700,000 overtime budget, and we will steward free cash so that we can meet that need within this fiscal year.
So for the next year, we can do that. Am I correct?
For FY24.
Okay.
So is that your question?
Yes.
So yeah, I think if we are going to increase the minimum shift from 14 to 16, I'm going to want to look hard at increasing that overtime.
Okay. But you can do that in a way that we can afford within the budget now. Okay, that's my first question. My second question is, what is the predicted, and I know I can't hold anyone to this, but it's a question, what is the predicted timeline for the Hatchville station to go online?
Yeah, that's an important question, and if everything goes according to the schedule, it could be completed as early as the middle of 2014.
24.
Sorry, I keep doing that. 2024. Thank you, Doug. But I think that's wildly optimistic. We keep hearing stories about it's a year out for HVAC equipment, for example.
Okay.
And even when you think you know what your schedule is, and Doug can speak to this as well, you speak with the contractor, they say, okay, that equipment is going to be delivered in March. And then you get to January, and you're told that in November. And then you get to January, and they say, nope, that equipment's not going to be delivered until May. So
or not available at all.
So I would, my answer to the question, when is the fire station going to be operational? The punch list takes a long time, even when the building is substantially complete. So I would think, and it's just a guess, that the beginning of 2015 is perhaps 2025
in the past.
is a reasonable, a reasonably optimistic forecast, and it could well be later.
Peter, what kind of inflationary rate are you kind of assuming?
Well, so we don't have, I don't know the answer to that question, Sam. We don't have a hard cost estimate yet. So when that cost estimate, because we're still in the design process, right? So we will have a professional cost estimate done when the design is completed, And at that time, we will dialogue with the the cost estimating firm to forecast that inflationary element.
Yeah, actually, my question goes back to budget forecasts, because obviously labor is like, what, 80% of our overall budget, or our operating budget?
So my forecast on the budget is based on primarily on our contracts. So it's not, I don't really have a generic inflationary number that we use. So we'll, I'm going on past experience and knowing that there will be more inflationary pressure on the expense side than we have seen in the past. We're in pretty good shape with our energy. Most of our energy prices are locked in, so we're in pretty good shape there. Not all of them, not gasoline and diesel, but electricity and natural gas we're in pretty good shape on. Yeah.
I have a couple questions. Is there any new thinking on whether or not we have to go at full speed ahead with the construction of the fire station? We were talking about whether or not there was any flexibility to slow down a bit and let staffing catch up. I don't know if you've had a chance to look into that yet.
Well, I have not asked the building committee to slow down, and the reason for that is because of the inflationary pressures in construction. Even though we all might hope that the supply chain issues improve, we don't know that they will with all the global instability that there is right now.
They seem to be.
And the costs keep going up, right? We haven't seen any moderating of the costs. So
no, that's not true at all. The lumber prices are coming down significantly now. We're starting to head in the right direction.
Didn't you say there's some concerns about timeline parameters with respect to legality too?
Yeah, that's what I was
liability.
talking about.
Right, if we were to intentionally delay construction, we'd have to talk to the architect and the owner's project manager about whether that can be accomplished within the contractual cost.
That would be amending contracts.
Potentially. I mean, it depends, depending on what kind of delay we're talking about.
It could also be mutually agreeable, depending on what their schedule is and their workload.
I question the wisdom of that, because you look at the age of that West Falmouth station, you're talking about something that's very obsolete, and now we're talking about upgrading our facilities. Putting that sort of thing off, I think, is really short-minded. I mean, it really is too near-term. We have to think about the robustness of our facilities and equipment for our fire safety purposes.
Well, and I'm wondering, because this has come up before, I'd like to get a sense of where the board is on whether to recommend a delay or not. I'd like to bring that to a vote.
Also, before we do, if I could, I'd like to also discuss whether or not there's been any discussion with the school department about whether or not they really need that whole $500,000 from the short-term rental.
Okay, let's not mix
Well,
issues.
it bears.
Okay, but let's not mix issues. Right now, we're talking about the fire station, the Hatchville station. So I think I'd like to come, because it has come up before, and I think I'd like to bring that to a vote.
But if I could just make a point before we do, please. What if there is more available funds and we can hire more firefighters folded into the next budget, because this short-term rental could maybe used for not just affordable housing, but maybe it could supplement the firefighter budget? Because I think the budget recommendations are solid and really right on, with the exception of the fire staffing. So if we have a conversation with the school department, and I'd suggest we have a joint meeting, they've got an extra $1.5 million this year. Maybe
From where?
From the state, from funding.
From Chapter 70,
Yeah.
which Chapter 70 only goes to the schools.
Correct.
And I think, didn't we vote to give them that money?
We
Wasn't
did,
there a
because
joint meeting?
we first voted to put it all into affordable housing. And Jennifer Mullen asked us to reconsider our vote because the school department was counting on it that last year, and we agreed, but we said we could revisit it in the future. So my point is now that we should at least talk to them and see if that other $1.5 million is enough for them for this year to get them through, and if they're willing to part with any of that.
What does that have to do with?
Because if we had more
Hold
firefighter
on,
staffing
hold
right
on.
away.
Wait,
What does that have to do?
One person at a time, please.
What does that have to do with the timeline on the fire station?
Because if we take that money right now and put it into this coming budget, we hire more firefighters, I would not be opposed to going full speed ahead with the fire station.
But we can't we can't count on that yet. We haven't had that conversation with the schools.
Yeah.
I want the sense of the board as to whether they want to consider even delaying this or not.
Okay, well.
Because if they want to delay, then we can have all kinds of conversations. But I'm not getting the sense that the consensus of the board is to delay. And because it keeps coming up, I think we need to take it to a vote.
That's fine. I guess I don't really think we have all the information, but if that's what your choice is, you're the chair, so I agree.
I'd like to, if other board members think we shouldn't take it to a vote, please let me know, speak up.
Are you looking for a motion to take it to a vote?
I'm looking to see if this board wants to take it to a vote. I can't make that decision on my own, but because it keeps coming up and I can't get a sense of where the board is with this and how we should move, I think we should take it to a vote.
Personally, in this instance, I agree with Mr. Patterson that we don't know what we don't know. We know that if we wait, that there are no determining factors. We know what we're up against now with the way the economy is. I think you're better off staying on path right now is what I think.
Yeah, I would agree.
The one thing we do know is we don't have enough staff to staff all 6 stations.
But we are working on that.
Right, but I don't think.
And we know what the numbers are to do that. We don't know what the numbers are gonna be a year and a half past our project date. We don't know what the legality aspects would be on postponements. We don't know what the time and labor would be to negotiate that.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know any of that.
Madam Chair, if I may channel Jennifer Mullen right now. I hear what you're saying about the money that's going to the schools, but then the question would be, would they be willing, let's say there is a consensus that they would give up a certain amount of money for us to hire 2, 3, 4 firefighters, whatever it is. They would have to agree to that every year because reoccurring revenues for reoccurring expenses.
Yeah.
Or we would have to then find a way to put them in the budget later, which would be just next year. So there's a lot of ifs there, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
And it would only work if either we can guarantee that every year we would get that revenue, or we would then have to make sure that we put them in the budget. And we
Correct.
can't guarantee that we can do that yet.
That's correct.
Mr. Johnson?
You just want to make 2 points. One, I did have a preliminary conversation with Superintendent Lori Dewar, and she was not inclined to give up that revenue. She felt both the $1.5 million in increased Chapter 70 money and the $500,000 from short-term revenue would really be needed because the school has faced new challenges with specifically English language, and I'm going to get the current term.
English language learners.
English language learners. Those numbers have really gone up,
Mm-hmm.
and it has created cost pressures for their budget. So I'm not saying that's the end of the conversation. The board may very well want to have a joint meeting with the school committee or invite the chair and the superintendent in to explore that further, but I just wanted to mention that initial conversation that I had with Lori Dewar. The other thing I just want to suggest is just a process suggestion, which is I think Doug is correct that there isn't enough information, and it's sort of along the lines of what Scott said as well. You don't have enough information today to decide to delay construction. If there is an interest in delaying construction, it would be helpful. I think it's a good idea to take a straw vote, because that vote would be yes, we're interested, and then I can go do some more research and get the information that you would need to finalize that decision.
And that's exactly.
So the question isn't a
Right.
decision today, it's is there interest in pursuing a delaying construction?
Exactly, because then it would be incumbent upon you to do the research. That's a great way of framing it.
I mean, also, we're kind of mixing the operating budget with the capital budget as well. So, you're basically what Doug is asking us to do is move money from the capital budget over to the operating budget, and we've tended to try to keep those separate in terms of revenue streams.
I don't think that's correct. It's the school's operating budget versus the town's operating budget.
No, you're talking about affordable housing.
I'm talking about the revenue.
Building.
I'm talking about the revenue from short-term rentals and how it be used, whether it be for the school operating budget or the town operating budget.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So these are recurring revenues, Sam? So in that sense, they're recurring revenues that the board has voted to allocate to affordable housing. So it is a little confusing because that funding for affordable housing, which is more of a capital type expense, wouldn't necessarily need to be a recurring revenue source, but in this instance, it happens to be a recurring revenue source.
I think perhaps I didn't make it clear. I'm talking about the fact that that fire station is going to be built as a capital exclusion part of the revenue, all right? And we try to manage that debt, if you will, that funds those kind of things, versus putting money into, be it affordable housing or salaries. So we do have sort of two different places and sort of design two different revenue streams from the real estate taxes or other sources.
Well, Madam Chair, if I
Yes.
may, I would move that as of now, the select board continue the process of building the fire station on the timeline we currently have.
Are you making a motion?
That's my motion.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear, it wasn't clear enough to me. What's the motion?
The motion is for the select board to continue with the process of building the Hatchville fire station on the timeline we currently have.
Okay, if there wasn't a second, I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion from Angela. We have a second from Scott Zelinski. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
I'm going to simply abstain because I don't think we have enough information to whether or not we can decide that.
Okay, we have 4 yea, 1 abstention.
So, Madam Chair, I don't know if you want me to clarify. I know the board has read the memo, but for the public discussion, the recommendation from Chief Smith and I is that 14 additional firefighters are needed to staff 6 stations.
And does that need to happen in the FY24 budget?
Yeah, great question. So we don't, we don't necessarily need the firefighters before June of 2024. However, it is an 18-month to 2-year process to hire. Well, let me say this precisely. It's to hire one firefighter can reasonably be done in 18 months, maybe a little less. But to hire 14 firefighters, all of them, is going to take 2 years, we believe, because you don't get that many in any one year, and each one is a long time frame to begin with. So this is one of the tricky elements of this issue. Is we're going to need to, in order to make a commitment to hire people, we need the money in the budget. But we won't actually need to use the money in the budget for at least a year and probably most of 2 years. So
That's where it gets sticky.
it is sticky. So we would need, just to sort of put the timeline out there, the soonest we could authorize the positions would be April town meeting. And if we were to do that, the 2-year timeline, so it's April of 2023, add 2 years, you're looking roughly July 1, 2025.
To clarify, this is assuming that these are new firefighters out of the academy that we would have to completely train. That's what takes 18 months.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and we would expect most of them to not be fire academy trained, the vast majority.
And I have some notes in here from the first strategic planning session that if we were to be removed from civil service, that may be faster. Do we have any idea of how much faster that might be?
I would say you're talking in the 6-month range, maybe. So looking at the 2-year, maybe it's 6 months faster. We also know that the requests of all towns and there are many trying to get out of civil service for police and or fire, are bottlenecked in the legislature. They have not been approved. So
There's no guarantee that's going to happen anytime soon anyway.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So there's another
Right.
shifting plate, right? Anything else you would like to highlight in your report?
I think that's pretty much it. So $300,000 to $350,000 is the sort of new spending that we have to work with at this phase. Again, that number may be adjusted by the time we get to December, January, and that's about 3 firefighters.
So it's 3 firefighters.
And those are rough numbers, including all of the benefits and expenses.
So there's already 3 added to the FY '24 budget as it is.
Yes. Oh, wait, no, the FY '23 budget. We added 3 for this year,
Okay.
FY '23.
Isn't there 3 in the '24 budget also?
I thought there were as well, 3 additional.
Yeah.
There has been discussion of adding 3 additional in FY '24. That would be fully allocating your new revenue.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Thought we
So
did
that would
in
take the
there.
300,000, is that what you're saying?
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would use all.
So it's either we add 3 firefighters or we have these other 4.
Or we look at our other new positions.
Yeah.
Correct.
Or other new revenue.
Because your recommendations are adding an assistant park superintendent, increasing the East Falmouth Library from 26 to 30 hours a week, adding sustainability coordinator, and increasing the DEI position with the grade increase and a modest budget allocation. So we can either have all of those things or 3 firefighters.
Right. And I'm not making a recommendation between those two.
Right. You're just giving us the options.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I really think I would like to have a meeting with the school committee and discuss our situation and see if there's any flexibility in their budget. I know you just told me that it's not likely, but I'd still like to have the conversation.
So it goes back to our strategic plan and what the board sees as their priorities. And one of the pieces that I don't see figured in here anywhere, which I thought was a top priority, was social workers in our police department.
That should be under.
It is.
Yeah, that's in there.
It's in there.
That's
You know, what,
taken 2.
no, what I'm saying is, when we think about this versus 3 firefighters versus our priorities. I'm not saying that it's not in the strategic plan. I'm saying it's difficult because it adds another layer of what we have to decide on. Yes?
Yeah, just to talk about the funding strategy for adding 2 human services, 2 social workers within the police department. We do have vacant police patrol positions.
That we could.
Those budgeted funds could be reallocated to hire social workers.
Awesome.
Yeah.
My concern, and I thank you for bringing that up because I forgot about that we were just gonna mutate 2 positions. But then moving forward, when we get closer, hopefully to filling those positions, we would then have to fund 2 additional positions, but it's not an issue right now.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I
Thank
think
you for clarifying that.
You're welcome.
I forgot
And
about that.
What we
We're
talked
down
about.
7 or 8 right now, right? Positions at PD.
That was more than that.
That's more.
17 at one
We
point.
have 10 vacancies. We recently hired 7. We were at 17.
So it'll be a little while those positions are being funded.
Right.
By
So it
crossing
gives
those
us some
over.
breathing space.
No,
It may give
absolutely.
us a year or 2. Okay, that, I totally forgot about that, so thank you.
That'll cover that gap for a while.
Right. But I do think it's important that you have it in writing in the strategic plan.
Yes.
That we're going to restore those police patrol positions.
And that may
Yes.
help recruiting too, knowing that there are clinicians on, guys wanting to come here to work, men and women wanting to come here to work, that we're fully staffed with
Yeah.
clinician.
Even when
Or
zero.
at least reduce attrition.
No, you're exactly right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, on page 8 of the strategic plan, the second section, the specific actionable goals, the first point is exactly this, but I would like that language to be reviewed, because I put in there what I thought for FY '25 and beyond the select board would, sorry, it says for FY '24, for the public's benefit. The FPD will convert 2 patrol officer positions to clinicians. For FY '25 and beyond, the select board will 1, add the 2 patrol officer positions back into the FPD budget, and 2, add at least 2 clinicians to the FPD budget. So, I don't know if that language is agreeable as it's written between us and with the chief. You might wanna.
It's okay as a goal.
It's pretty clear to me.
Is it clear
It's
enough?
a
Oh,
clear-
if he signs off, I mean, if the wording is right with him,
Yeah, then I think it's
it
fine.
looks good here.
Right.
I would know
It
better
does-
than him.
And it doesn't take anything away from his department. It
Right.
simply mutates for
Right.
1 year, maybe 2 year.
Right.
But it doesn't take any positions away. So I think the specificity of that language
It's clear enough.
is good.
Well, after you look at something for a long time, you
Yes.
start to wonder.
I think it's good
Exactly.
language, even if we adjust the budget later and use the police positions that are not filled for another couple of years, if that flexibility is there, but at least it's a goal that we know that that's what we're gonna
If
do
we're
when
fortunate-
when we can.
If we're fortunate enough to even have the staffing numbers to be able to backfill that,
Right.
we're in good shape going forward, filling
I
those
agree.
with open vacancies. I think that's a strong point.
And it keeps it front and center, though, is having that language,
Yeah.
which I think is important.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
The one clarification I would ask is, I'm reading this as that we have 2 social worker positions in FY '24 and we add 2 more in FY '25, or am I misreading that?
Keeping at least 2 on the budget. So if the 2 patrol officers are converted to clinicians, and then we go back later and add 2 more patrol officer positions, we wanna make it clear that those 2 clinician positions would still be there.
Will be funded.
So
we
can
would
we-
have to fund them.
Yeah.
So would it make sense under bullet number 2 to change the word add to retain?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Peter, with discussions with the chief, did he feel like 2 was gonna be enough?
So he was talking about starting with 1 or 2, and I suggested that, we start with 2. I think he wants to walk before he runs, and get them acclimated, see how it works. I think you're right that in the long run, we may find that we
In the
want more.
3-shift model
It'll
might be advantageous because of the shifts.
And it's helpful too, because they can bounce ideas off each other as they develop the
Right.
position, because once one person by themselves, it's hard to.
I'm just talking about shift coverage and being available, somebody being available 24 hours a day. It's not coming out of a dead sleep. Somebody's on call on shift, even if the clinicians do 3 shifts or however they work that out.
I think initially he was not looking at 24/7 coverage for the social workers.
But it's gonna prove itself out one way or the other once you get 2 on working, and he'll be able to adjust from that. That's a good call.
And I think I would like to change the mental health clinicians to licensed clinical social workers.
Okay.
They're LICSWs, and they're highly trained.
Great.
Hopefully that'll still fall with.
There's this whole paragraph about being in a good position after, dealing with COVID, which I think a lot of this is true, but maybe not necessary for us to keep moving forward, unless we just want to have it in there as a reflection of what was in the last plan. We did not specifically talk about monitoring appropriate grant opportunities and procedures for submitting and tracking grant applications. I assume we wanted to keep that, but that's not something we talked about. But we have also talked about having reduced staff capacity right now. So it can still be a goal, maybe just keeping in mind that we may not be able to do all the grants that we want to right now.
Right, but it's still a good
It's still a
thing to
good
put
goal.
on paper and
Yep.
say that's what we would like to be doing.
So we agree we want to keep that one in there.
I think so.
Yeah, I'm okay with keeping that in there as
Okay.
well, because I think, it may be a reach, but that's okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
But what about that upper paragraph?
Are you talking about the additional paragraph that was added?
The highlighted paragraph under section 3.
Yeah, I would strike the last words due to COVID-19. I think we have an ongoing issue. I would just say, and just let it be in food insecurity and mental health issues, period. COVID's going to be with us. It's going to be endemic. So I don't want to highlight that anymore, personally.
Because we want to keep doing it after COVID's gone.
Exactly.
Assuming COVID ever
It
goes
away.
If COVID has exacerbated some of those issues, they're still going to be around.
Yeah.
So it's something that's gonna have to be navigated at some level
Yeah.
going forward always.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, the flu, people get the flu shots. Historically, we've been always reminded to get the flu shot. That was the pandemic of 1919, and it's just kind of been marginalized and maintained. COVID will be the same way, probably.
I think there are other parts of this paragraph that could go as well, though.
Yeah, I think so.
I suggest you can add in the previous paragraph, which apparently was a carryover from last year, but the very last sentence says the town's ongoing capital needs and wage pressure caused by the declining population of working age individuals in the region remain, it says the most pressing fiscal concern. I would say a pressing fiscal concern. It's not the most.
Agreed. Got it. Do we need the town is fortunate? Blah, 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 up till the Great Recession a decade ago.
No,
Do we need that?
I don't think so.
I don't think we need that.
So the first
agree.
3 sentences.
I like the first phrase, the town is fortunate to be in a good position. That continues to be true. The rest of it, I agree, is
Yeah, let's
no
just
longer
rewrite
needed.
that though a little bit and then get rid of the, the board anticipates some capital improvements.
Yeah, that I think should go.
I agree.
Scaling back capital improvements, I don't think we necessarily need to.
The town is fortunate to be able to increase staffing levels, targeted services. So I think we keep the town is fortunate and we rework that first sentence. We get rid of, we strike everything else
I think,
up until the town has been fortunate.
I think really all the references to the global pandemic, it's time to
Maybe
remove
go.
them and just get back into a normal course of action.
Okay, so strike everything before the town has been fortunate to be able to increase staffing levels.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we get rid of everything before that, except that you want to rework that first sentence.
Well,
which is
actually,
fine.
now that I look at it, that sentence has it.
It covers it,
Yeah,
if
it
the
sort of
town has
covers
been
it, yeah,
fortunate.
yeah.
So let's rework, and I understand getting rid of, you're thinking, referring to COVID, I don't think we can totally get rid of it.
Maybe not totally, but it doesn't have to be in every paragraph.
I agree, but we are still, I think we are still in a place of it impacting us.
Yeah.
Speaking from someone who's still talking like a seal.
Yeah.
We do have in one of the bullet points, respond to fiscal impacts related to COVID-19. And I did add and inflation and explore new grant and revenue opportunities, because we have talked a lot about how inflation is affecting our budgets.
The other thing that may be in conflict, I mean, I like the town has been fortunate, yada, yada, but then it goes on to say it may not be prudent to add new positions or, and I'm wondering if we need to.
We can take out that sentence.
Yeah, I think there's, again. And I'm okay with this broad strategic plan, influence decisions. And then end it, I agree with Sam, end it mental health issues.
Okay.
Get rid, Cole.
Does anyone else want water?
Okay. The only other two things on here were review and support plan for reorganization of town offices and necessary renovation at town hall. We've not talked about that.
Yeah, that struck me as odd.
That
Where-
was
and
from the
that's,
old plan.
that's been around for quite a while.
And so where I think this came from is in the Coastal Resiliency Action Committee report. One of their recommendations is moving town hall because it's in a, I can't remember, it's either in a 50, I think it's in a 20 or 50 year floodplain. And so I think that's where this came from because I remember seeing it in that report. Am I wrong?
Both things are going on. That is certainly true, but there was a reorganization plan that the previous town manager put forth that went to town meeting and was not funded. That was about rearranging the existing structure and not really related to, it certainly was unrelated to moving town hall, and it wasn't really related to storm-proofing town hall. It was just a renovation to, partly to put all of the inspectional staff, community development staff in one location, and also to rearrange stairways and put a conference room on the second
So
floor.
that had nothing to do with upkeep, like the rotten wood out front and the paint that needs to be
No.
done. That has
I
nothing to
think
do
it
with
was-
that upkeep.
I think it was
Correct.
about connecting departments that made sense that you'd
So
walk.
it's more interdepartmental
That's
than
what, that's
structural.
what I thought. And so I would be willing to get rid of that.
Yeah, unless we think we need to work on it, which I don't think it should be a goal right now. And then support development of improved high-speed internet service. We have not talked about that in the context of a strategic plan. I think it should stay. I think it is a goal that we want to support that.
and that was mentioned in the chart by the Charter Review Committee when they looked at our strategic plan. That was actually a bullet point that they made in there that they thought should be, re-emphasized.
Okay, thank you.
COVID impacts. My bartender from my college union has got a temperature of 102 right now. We need a new bartender. Oh my goodness.
My wife's got 6 people out right now.
Yeah.
All right, can we move on to number 4, health and public safety, which we did already kind of go through a little bit. But I highlighted, consider land acquisition and funding for new replacement fire station based on a 5 fire station model, based on the McGrath study, et cetera, et cetera. Then, this again is from the old plan, so it needs to be adjusted because we currently have a 6 station model.
Right.
But do we want to keep this in here? Is considering land acquisition for a replacement fire station? It doesn't say, but I'm assuming this is referring to the northwest quadrant of
That
town.
was I don't know if I made that comment, but that's one that came up to me about the old language.
Okay.
Because it should say, that was something I had issue with the first time we had it in our plan, was till a new replacement fire station, because you could construe that to mean the Hatchville station.
Right.
Right.
So we need to change this to a 6 station model, because that is our current policy. And make it clear that this is referring to the northwest quadrant of town.
So can I ask for clarification? Is the thought then that the board would look to construct a northwest station, but still have 6 stations?
No, this is just,
No.
my understanding is this is considering the land options. So, like, I don't remember what piece of property somewhere near 151 came up last year as a potential, and I think if it's in the strategic plan, then that, we know that's worth the board discussing, as opposed to if it's not in the plan and something came up, it would not be something that someone would think would be a priority to bring to us.
And that didn't come out of the language. Doug had brought up about the police station being, obtaining some land for a future police station, wasn't that?
I just threw that out there because one of the local,
I just didn't know if it got caught up in that language.
one of the local police officers said, why don't we consider the corner of Gifford and Brick Hill? Because just like the high school is centrally located in town, the police station would be centrally located. That's
Sorry,
just
I didn't
just an
mean to
idea for the
interrupt.
future. Not that, if we're spending $1 million to fix our current station, I don't think we're gonna do it right away. But just something to think about.
I think the number of fire stations really should be based on data and response times. And so I think I see it as an evolving thing, but certainly I'm concerned about how obsolete the West Falmouth station is too. So if we put a new northwest station in and we see that response times are good, then I see no reason why we should carry a 6th station under those circumstances. But that can be figured out 5-10 years from now, after we actually have some run data.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So for keeping in line with our current policy, we will change this language to 6.
Yes.
Are we talking about the yellow highlighted
Yes.
Yeah.
paragraph?
Yeah, the very last word of the first sentence.
Well, that can still stay in as 5 as long as it's when we are closing north and west and we're combining them. I mean, at the construction of a new northwest station, we could go back to the 5-station model at that time if it's feasible. Personally, I don't think that's going to be the case because we're going to have already ramped up our staff to do the 6-station model. And I think if you look geographically, even though West Falmouth gets very little calls right now, who knows over the years what it was, but if I'm just so, I can't get away from the map with the geographical locations. It just seems to make sense to me, even though I know it's a low call rate.
I think we just need to remember, though, that it's not gonna make a difference in terms of staffing.
Correct.
Right? So I think we need to put a 6-station model, because that's what we're operating from right now, moving forward with the Hatchville station. And I think we had this conversation before, unless or until.
You're right, the
We
language.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly, and that's the language we
And
talked about.
Sam just said data's
So-
gonna drive that narrative when the time
And
comes.
then the policy could change.
Right,
That's fine. Okay, that's fine.
but it is 6 at this point.
Right,
So-
for right now.
Yeah, so along those lines, would it make sense to clarify, let's see, it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, I think it's the 5th bullet that says continue to staff West Falmouth Station? Do you add on to that sentence to clarify that, you know, the policy is a 6-station model unless and until construction of a new replacement fire station for North and West
Yeah,
Falmouth?
or a combination northwest, yeah. And I think that's the language we have talked about.
Yeah.
And it's reassuring to that population that are part of that community too, that we identify that as an important,
Right.
Mhm.
an important mission.
And that it doesn't move the needle in staffing at all.
Okay, can we move on to management of coastal natural resources and infrastructure? Doug, you did send something, consider a policy modeled after Chatham to require recurring beach nourishment to compensate for coastal structures.
Yeah, Chatham, if you do, they don't approve a lot of them, but when you do, like replace an old revetment, there's a commitment to deliver sand to make up for whatever would be migrating from your property. It's just a policy that I thought was smart and innovative, and I think it should be considered at some point by whoever would be. I guess the Conservation Commission would be the ones to implement that if they decided it's a worthy goal.
So I'd be interested in learning more about that, because in the Coastal Resiliency Action Plan, they recommend that we do not allow, that we should have a policy that does not allow the rebuilding or new construction of certain like jetties and other things that groins, thank you.
No, I think it's all structures really, pretty much what they were targeting.
Right. So I would want to see how this would, how those two would work together, or if they don't work together.
They don't work together.
Which one we would want to do. Because one of our goals here is to review, discuss, and adopt the recommendations of that plan. So at some point we would want to add that into our discussion. Do we want to have this, or do we want to have that, or do we not want to do anything?
Just saying, like, it's something we can incorporate now and not take away property rights.
Pardon me, could you armor that position by categorizing it as a maintenance issue? Say we had a supply of beach nourishment material that we had on an annual contract, and by keeping up with the maintenance part of it, you get away from the new construction part of it, because you're not coming back to a point where it has to be reconstructed.
Right.
It's being maintained.
Just like what we just approved at our
Does that
last
make
meeting,
sense?
there's an old seawall that's fallen apart, and we approved putting in sheet pile. And there's a lot of those old things. Maybe there should be some beach nourishment associated with it.
There are legalities that we can walk the line on with respect to procedure.
Yeah.
That keeps us from having to kick that can down the road with red tape and all that. I'm not saying do anything that's not. I'm saying read the order of conditions in a way that allows us to come right up to that and maintain what we've got going without having to go be circumvented by the process, if you will.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but there's going to be instances where we can't agree 100% with all the recommendations. I mean, those goals that they put are for the big picture. We don't want jetties everywhere. We don't want to be encouraging coastal structures if we can avoid it. But there are some places where we just couldn't agree. I mean, I had to speak against the policy that they had proposed when we wanted to do the Minot Beach, because we had engineering plans that showed that without the groins to maintain that nourishment that we need to do to maintain the road, it just really isn't going to work. So the Coastal Resiliency Committee advocated on that project nourishment alone. And nourishment alone, in my opinion, I'm just a contractor, I would say that it looked like all the sand is just going to go right back into the channel, just like it did several years ago when we had that huge nourishment project without the groins. I mean, we had a case in point of actual what happened, so we know it's likely to happen again. So town meeting voted to go with the plan that had 2 groins to retain the nourishment. So that's against the policy that they're advocating for. And I don't like to go against, those are smart folks on that committee, and I think it's a worthy goal that they have to remove those structures and let the natural sand move, but there's going to be instances where we don't agree.
This is actually the jurisdiction of state. And we can't make those decisions.
But we can make policies.
Sure, for whatever it is, ink on a page.
Yeah.
But really, it's beyond our control.
Well, not really, because we just approved a project at our last meeting that had sheet piles replacing an old stone wall with no beach nourishment. We could have required beach nourishment if we wanted to.
It's not a jetty.
No, it's not.
And that's basically maintaining existing conditions. But it's a different matter when you put a jetty out into a state and federal body of water.
I agree with that, definitely true.
So I think we could consider it within the strategic priority, because at some point we'll have to add a review and discussion of the plan to a meeting. If we're good, I assume we would need to do that at some point.
I'd be happy with saying consider it.
Yeah,
just
consider it.
So
And
that
it's still a priority.
Or
Yeah.
explore.
Explore
it.
it.
Yeah. Just throwing it out there.
Ask you to change this, just as a word ending, but
Sure.
under the category of the specific actionable goals within this strategic priority plan area, please change it to develop a plan to protect public infrastructure and private development. Let's get away from this business of develop a policy. The policy is how you implement things, but we need a plan to basically try to look at how we're going to protect public and private infrastructure, or private and public property.
Okay.
It's too much bureaucratic gobbledygook in my mind. But we do need a plan.
Okay.
And I don't know whether you saw it, but Wednesday night, Nova had a documentary about this situation in Venice, and how combination of subsidence but sea level rise together have really threatened that city in a major way. We're not talking about occasional, puddles. We're talking about literally people having 2 feet of water in an almost unpredictable way, and it's not related to hurricanes and coastal storms, but actually related to variations in tidal activity. And that's, of course, exacerbated by the fact that we have all these glaciers that are melting and flowing into the ocean. And the predictions are pretty significant and are pretty scientifically based. And so it's a reality this town is going to have to face, as well as places like Venice.
Thanks, Sam.
Unless we choose to become like the Netherlands and have giant dikes and pumps and all kinds of crazy stuff. But they've been at it for 400 years, so they got a pretty good system. They actually drained waterfront and made it into farmland.
Exactly. I think, it's a strategic goal. We need to be looking at planning for these kinds of 50-year phenomena, which I feel somewhat responsible for. And there's a book that I've been reading of what we owe the future, which is what do we living today owe to these future generations that will be taking over this municipality.
Right. Number 6, organizational effectiveness and community engagement. A lot of what we discussed was actually in the previous plan, so there's just honestly a lot of copy and paste here, and then adding in some of the specifics that we talked about. One thing I did want to kind of ask as we're thinking about the budget is just the one. Hold on. Oh, the departmental assessment or audit. I put assessment or audit because I wasn't sure what the appropriate word was for what we actually want to get done. But I wanted to know, as we're looking at the FY24 budget and we want to work on this relatively quickly, can we use free cash for an initial assessment or audit, whatever we want to call it, and then add it into the operating budget if it needs to be followed up on?
Yeah, I think you could potentially fund all of those multi-year projects with free cash because they're not, they're not capital projects per se, but they could certainly be looked at as one-time projects, even if you're going to fund it 3 years in a row. Mm-hmm. Unless you really think you're going to do, $15,000 or $20,000 every single year, then you might want to put it in the operating budget. But certainly initially, free cash should make sense.
Okay.
Can I just offer an option on wording that the town has done a number of management studies, is the term that was used when a consultant was hired to review fire department operations. A consultant was hired to look at community development functions. A consultant was hired to come in and look at the public works department. So those looked at staffing levels and organizational structure and how the department is operating. I'm not sure if that's the kind of thing that you're looking for.
I'm not sure if I like that.
I think what we were looking for, in addition, well, maybe not in addition to, other than those things, was the functionality of the department and the management within the department, right? Those
Right.
kind of things.
Because that leads to retention and
Right.
attrition and
Those kinds of
Yeah,
things.
I also want to get down to the human level in those departments. It isn't just, for me, and I don't know if the board agrees, but for me, it isn't just about how it's managed, how it functions, what the structure is, but because we have people leaving departments, and I feel like we have way too many people leaving, they need to get down in more into the grit and into the weeds of how
Why?
that department really functions, why they're leaving. I want the human aspect in there as well as just looking at management, looking at the structure, and also the other piece for me that's really important is how do we as a board and as a town support those departments more efficiently and effectively.
right.
So I don't want to just look at management. So that's the word I'm stuck on.
So I wasn't sure if it was considered an assessment or audit. I think we need to dig a little bit into what that's called.
I think an important element of that would be exit interviews from the folks that we
Absolutely,
lost.
100%.
I think we're gonna find out a lot of it is just normal stuff, like just the same reason our kids are going, my daughter's in Virginia. They make the same money down there and their living is half the cost.
Right.
Jennifer Mullen said she's making more money in Cohasset, less hours, flexible work schedule, she gets to work from home one day a week.
That may not be the all of the reasons
No, it's not all. But I'm
of
just
why
saying,
people
alone-
leave and they go other places. It's the other reasons that make them pick up after being in a position, say, 11, 12 years,
Mhm.
and leave.
Yeah.
After having seniority, having this, having that.
Mhm.
We need to know why.
Right.
Both sides of the coin.
Yeah,
I
that,
have no idea why, I'm just guessing a lot of it.
Well, I
Might be
mean-
just regular reasons.
And they have to
like-
be consistent.
yeah.
But then we also need to know those things.
For 100 years at least, that we can actually have come in on a consultation basis to kind of advise us what's the best way to retain employees, especially those that we really value the most. I mean, there are factors that we can't control, but there's certainly, I agree with Nancy, there are factors about how managers deal with their constituents to make them feel like they're valued and respected style-wise. And there's even in-service training that could be brought in for, department heads and managers.
And we do have an exit interview scheduled for Jennifer Mullen.
I've spoken to her in terms of an exit interview and
Okay.
also offered to have our HR consultant speak with her for an exit interview.
As an interview, okay.
She's agreed.
She did not.
So there is no exit interview.
Beyond my conversations with her, that's correct.
On the fourth bullet point on the ongoing goals, receive reports from department heads on topical issues as needed. And I'll direct this to you, Peter. I feel like we spend a lot of time checking on issues that are unresolved or resolved for whatever reasons. I think the language should be changed from as needed. Number one, I want to know who makes a determination if it's needed or not.
I'm sorry, what budget, what item are you on? No,
You're on the fourth bullet point on the ongoing goals within strategic priority area, where it says receive reports from department heads on topical issues as needed.
Okay.
And without being too specific, we have more than a handful of things going on, and because we cannot contact the department heads individually, I spent a lot of time riding around looking at things that should be finished and aren't, and I called and asked, what's our status, this and that. Who makes the determination on the reports from the department head as needed? Who makes the needed decision? Would that be you? Would that be us? Or does the language need to be, should it be receive periodic, monthly, weekly reports, whatever that is, to help nail that request down?
We get department head reports.
We get those
don't we?
quarterly, I think.
Well,
but-
there are quarterly written reports.
Yeah.
Yep. When this was written, I believe there was a time when the department heads were coming in periodically to select board meetings to give reports.
Right.
And it sounds like that's more the kind
Well,
of thing that you're talking
part
about.
of my request when we were developing this was, when we've seen a lot of LIP applications go through, and that we're directly responsible for, we stand in for all the other departments on a LIP application. We give our as a board, we give the zoning board a recommendation to be able to do it with our approval. Therefore, I feel like we should have some responsibility in how they're being done, run, because we're the ones that recommend that. All I want is to clean up the language on that and not make it so obtuse, if you will.
Are you asking for written reports, or are you asking?
Well, I'm
for verbal?
asking for that without being too descriptive, Peter, there are projects going on in town that have issues that are unresolved, and every time somebody calls and asks what the resolution to that is, we're working on it. Well, with the amount of things that snowball, things get lost in the priority of things. I personally, when I call about something and ask, I'd like to know, I'd like it to be somebody else's responsibility to get back to me on the progress of the resolution, instead of it being up to me to call and find out, or not step over you to go to a department head to find that answer out. Now, I know you're very busy, but I just want to clean that language up where it's not, oh, the department heads come in once a month. That doesn't encompass anything I'm asking for or requesting respect for them.
Can I bring up something that's sort of parallel?
I see.
So,
I think I see where you're going.
in the past, I had made requests for another policy discussion, and one of them was to discuss whether or not the select board policy should not exclude us from talking to department heads. The reason that I thought of that is every time we do the town manager evaluation, and we may modify the evaluation tool again if we want to, but a lot of it is, how does the town manager interact with department heads? We don't really have a lot of insight into that unless we speak directly with the department heads. And also, as long as we use discretion and don't become too needy and too intrusive, we should interact with department heads occasionally, throughout the year, to just see how things are going. Get that kind of feedback that we need. So I think that was sort of an informal policy that we were kind of operating
Isn't that
under.
an adjustment to the charter, though?
It is in the charter.
Okay.
But that would be an adjustment to the charter, Doug. That's
Okay.
why, again, not before us today,
Yeah.
us looking at the charter to be able to adjust some of those things.
It's a tricky one because
Well,
some
it's
select
not
boards-
tricky, it's in the charter, you can't,
No,
you
but I
can't
mean,
go to the department heads.
I'm saying
He's
that whether or not you
changing it.
change it is tricky, because some select board members may be more, better at not being too intrusive and yet being successfully interacting, whereas some might be calling too often and demanding things and,
But I think
creating.
that's a trap that the charter protects us
Yeah,
from,
I
the way
agree
it's
with that.
written.
Yeah.
But I also think you, and this just goes back to my previous life, but I also think you're putting department heads in a very difficult position.
I guess that's
To
probably
be
true.
talking to the select board about things and/or about the organizational structure, I personally don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Right.
I think,
Yes.
a department head, it is going to influence the way they speak to us,
Mhm.
right? And and putting them on the spot, I personally could not go along with that. And I do hear what you're saying in terms of their written reports, because we do need more information about specific projects, where they're at, whether, I'm just making this up, but whether they're.
No, you're
whether they're
right on
lit-
track.
Whether they're being litigated or not, whether there's an appeal, whatever those issues are.
Whether they've been filed, whether there's any ongoing litigation, how
Exactly.
that overlaps, all of that
What are the
becomes
problems?
so convoluted
Right.
that when you make a 13-minute phone call and he's got 400 other things to do, you find yourself a month later with it being, trying to find out what the status is. Somebody should be responsible to be able to report that
And we're
and have
making,
language to do that.
and we're making decisions on things that we don't have enough information on.
Absolutely.
However, I also believe that the appropriate funnel is from department heads through the town manager.
Absolutely, chain of command.
And I believe it has to be that way. I don't think we should be reaching out, and this is just, again, I feel really strongly about this. I don't think we should be going to department heads,
Okay.
having conversations, just because, it puts, I feel like it puts them in a really difficult
I
position.
guess I see your point.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and I'm not saying that this board would take advantage of it or do something, but structurally, organizationally, I don't believe it's a good idea.
I would like
I
to
would
see
never
monthly
support that.
monthly
Guess I would
department
retract
head
my
reports.
idea.
With Nancy, by the way, and I did have the opportunity to study this as a master's degree. And, you know, we have to see ourselves as a board of directors. And it's the CEO, the executive director, whatever you want to go. That's the person whose feet we hold to the fire. I've always operated in that way because I think that's the way the charter structures our organization. And so I always go to the town manager and say, what's going on here if I think there's an issue in town or there's an issue with a particular department. And that's the person that we control. We can hire and fire if necessary, but I mean that in a positive way as well. So, you know, I think you have to recognize that the chain of command, Nancy, I think is correct, is our relationship to the town manager. And we can call them on the carpet and ask, we want to report on what's going on at this particular department, but it's the town manager that needs to be interfacing to us.
Okay,
Right.
that's true, you're right.
And
I agree.
when we don't get what we think that we need, it's the town manager that we hold accountable, right? But I think not respecting that funnel of it, information
I
coming from
agree.
him. But I also agree with what you're saying in terms of what it is that we need in a report moving forward.
So then back to my initial, receive reports from department heads on topical issues as needed. Does that need to be cleaned up, the language, or not? That's all
I
I'd
hate that
ask.
topical.
Yeah.
What does that
This is
mean?
from the,
That's from the old language.
this is the old.
And who's
Yeah.
responsible for feeding that back to us?
I think it needs to be receive reports from department heads, and it can be on
By way of town
specific
manager,
items
or-
as submitted to the town manager, something like that, so that we recognize the funnel or the chain of command. But it also recognizes the information that we need in those
Agreed.
reports that are very important to us as we're
And
making
sometimes time
maybe
sensitive as
decision.
well.
Yeah,
Maybe
extremely.
Maybe it's a, similar to the way we've modified our agenda to have the preliminary report and the supplemental report. Maybe the department head reports could be an
Part of one of
addendum with
those.
that preliminary report, introducing the department head reports, and then the summary report, you know, analyzing steps forward. Maybe in the introductory, it identifies challenges that some departments are facing and ongoing
Chronological
issues.
progress on
A little
on
deeper
permit.
insight into what those reports are telling us.
I think that would be critical. And I think it would make our decisions and our work more meaningful. So that if there is something on an agenda,
Would be up to speed on it.
exactly, that something comes up on an agenda, it also gives the department heads an opportunity to weigh in.
Right.
So I think that's a great idea. I think functionally and process-wise,
Does that sound like having you interpret the department heads and giving us a summary, you know, precursor, and afterwards similar to the structure of the agenda on the select board meetings?
Yeah, the piece, I understand the general idea, and I think I can definitely look at improving written follow-up to the board on issues that have come up, right? So I think, you know, I'm hearing Scott's suggestion that, you know, an email may come across raising a question, or a select board member may get a question from a constituent and call or email me, and then I need to make sure to close that loop and provide status reports on, what's going on with this license agreement. What I'm less clear on is on the agenda, in the supplemental report, the combination of the supplemental report in which I try to, provide the relevant information for the items on the agenda based on information I've received, either gathered myself or from the department heads. And then in the packet itself, we put what we have in terms of the relevant information for those topics. I don't know, so I don't know how much more that we can do in terms of agenda items. I don't know. I was misunderstood.
No, we're not talking about the agenda.
Okay.
And this is in the quarterly reports.
Okay.
I brought up the agenda to say that Nancy's suggestion, and we've been implementing, is having the preliminary report and the supplemental report. Maybe the quarterly reports from department heads could also be augmented with that similar structure, having the preliminary introduction to department head reports, saying that, we still struggle to get affordable housing, and some of these departments are working on this and that. And at the end, summarizing steps forward based on what the department reports indicate to you.
Mine is a little different approach than that, Doug.
All right.
Here's where I struggle with the system, Peter. If hypothetically I call you about an issue that I've been made aware of through constituency or a drive-by or whatever, and you and I discuss it, the rest of the board has none of that information. That this project may be failing or this incident may be continuing to happen, and you and I discuss it by charter rules, but then something happens that exacerbates the issue, and then it comes before the board. They don't have any, or vice versa, they don't have any of that preliminary information or context that we've talked about. One of the board members has clearly identified something as a problem that the other ones don't have the information to. We need to be able to close that gap and bring that to everyone has the same amount of information on a perceived issue or one that's been resolved in real time.
But it has to be at the meeting.
Well, that's for
unless
us.
It's just informational. I mean, there could be.
It could be written if there's no dialogue needed, right?
Right.
If it's
So it's to bring it's number one, a courtesy to the rest of the board members. The last thing you want is board members interacting outside of the charter rule on issues that they can't get any traction on because nobody else knows about it or cares about it because they don't know.
Right.
I think it's a way to include the board and add context to issues that need to be resolved or have been resolved.
Right.
Or just more informational bullets.
Right.
Okay.
And there's a benefit to it too, that people trying to circumvent the system arbitrarily knows that it's going to be addressed to the whole board to help clean up the process on their end.
Right.
Sounds like another
I
good
can see
suggestion.
that.
I like both of these ideas.
I do
Thank
too.
you.
Definitely, I think it makes a lot of sense.
How do we fit the language into it? I guess with department heads,
Through the,
receive reports from department heads on topical issues as needed,
taking out the.
including.
I think the language that if you clean the language up, it's something we can work on as part of, if that becomes a heading that's encompassing, we can adjust it as we go on
Yeah,
how
we can
to define that.
We can wordsmith that and make it go back and forth to see if we can make it kind of concrete and understandable.
That'd be right.
And then maybe send that language out to the board. It'll be just a sentence or two, and then everybody reply back to Angela.
Or we can just.
Without
Because it's
any-
a full input. It's
Yeah,
not,
And then
right,
we'll vote
that's
it at
all
a
I'm
regular
saying.
meeting.
Right,
vote.
Yeah.
and because we're gonna vote the strategic plan, I hope as it's all completed,
Right.
right?
Yeah, I think if we can agree on all these things, wordsmith the things that we've talked about,
Mhm.
and then spend 5 minutes at not our next board meeting, because that's Monday,
Yeah.
at the next
yeah,
board
because we
meeting.
all know what we're talking about. It's
Right.
just
Yeah.
cleaning up.
And it's
the
making
approach.
the language understandable, that's all. It's making it concrete and understandable, because I think we're all in agreement in terms of the sort of the philosophical piece of it,
Right.
right?
Okay.
We just need to nail it down.
Yeah. Okay, if there's no other comments on that one, we can
Thank
go-
you for the time on that as well.
Absolutely. Number 7, water, wastewater, and solid waste management. These first 2 paragraphs are straight from the old, I should say old, the previous strategic plan. I didn't wordsmith them at all. We are still having the water consumption and meeting peak seasonal demand, specifically this year because of the drought, as you know. We are doing work on the wastewater treatment facility. You know, so I think all of this is still reasonably important to keep. I didn't add anything and I didn't detract anything from it.
Yeah, I agree.
Any thoughts, Sam?
I agree.
Okay. All right, well, then I think we're about done.
Well, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
Very well done, madam.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you all for your work on this too.
It's been a good job, and thank you for taking it mostly off of Peter's plate when he's got enough to do.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you say that, Doug, because one of the things I wanted to be really clear about, and it speaks to exactly what you're saying, is the strategic plan is the plan of the boards.
Right.
Right? And so the town manager, although he has input, it should be minimal.
Right.
Right? Because we own it. It's ours. His job will then to be to go
Administrative execution.
implement what it is that we've come up with in terms of what we need.
Exactly.
I know that the town manager also usually does the compiling of the language.
Yes.
And I was happy to do that because we're doing things very differently and also understanding like how much is currently on Peter's plate. So I was happy to add that extra step to it that would normally be the town manager's responsibility.
And I think that's what Doug is
Yeah.
complimenting you on, in that you've taken that piece off his plate.
Appreciate that.
It's just that I think at times in other strategic plans, I felt as though the town manager position had too much influence on the strategic plan.
I think it was just
We
that he
need
was
to
trying
own
to
it.
be helpful and
Absolutely.
doing the administrative work that was
Absolutely, but in
before us,
but
but
in
now-
terms of the content, Doug,
Mhm.
and the substantive stuff, we have to do that and we have to own it, because
Right.
it's our strategic plan.
But having you lead it and do the work, I think it lends itself more to a process where that happens more effectively.
Agreed, 100%.
By having
Thank
more
you.
input on the language, it helps us understand the plan even better.
Right,
Because
that's
we
all.
develop the language.
Right.
And I also think that the process that we did this year makes every one of us own it.
Oh, no,
And it's not
absolutely.
just something that's just gonna go sit somewhere.
Right.
This should be a living document that we continuously go back to, just like the charter. What does the charter say? What does our
And
strategic
get
plan
called
say?
on
Right.
when appropriate.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we did it over the course of a few meetings on a Saturday rather than one 5 o'clock afternoon
Oh,
meeting
absolutely.
during the week, so.
It's too much.
Right.
It's too much to do. All right.
Now I'll gladly pass things back to you.
Now, we're going to go back to, now that we have developed our priorities, we need to really talk about reprioritizing our priorities.
You mean in order of?
In order of how much money is available,
Mhm.
how we think about that, if we're gonna do anything differently, how does that get funded? What are the priorities that we want? We have Mr. Johnson Staub's, his budget priority memo. We have a memo from the fire chief, and we have our strategic plan. So we have 3 buckets, sort of requests and priorities.
Mhm.
And now we need to decide where we're going with that.
Well-
And I'd like to take a little bit of a break. Can we take a 5-minute break
Okay.
before we do that?
Biological break?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I may call you next week anyway,
Oh, okay, great. Yeah.
Thank you, I haven't had double McDouble in years.
Anybody want to come?
No, thank you.
Why don't you try
We
it?
going back down?
Yeah.
It's definitely gonna rain a lot the next couple of days.
Yeah, it's not like we don't need it
We
though.
need it,
Oh,
yeah.
that's true.
My hamstrings are
I
already
don't
shot.
need it. I just set up my tent over there at the clubhouse for the reunion. What
All
a
right.
washout we're gonna have.
And we're gonna
Well, yeah, sandwich
reconvene.
fest
We
is
took a
close.
5-minute break. And we are back. So we have made some changes to the strategic plan, and we now know what the priorities of the board are. We have Mr. Johnson Staub's budget priorities, and we have requests or priorities from the fire chief. And so Mr. Johnson Staub has told us that we have between $300, and please correct me if I misspeak at all, $300,000 and $350,000 for requested positions for a level service budget. And he is recommending an assistant parks superintendent position, increase the East Falmouth library hours from 26 to 30 hours per week, add a sustainability coordinator, increase the diversity, equity, and inclusion position to full-time, along with a paid grade increase and a modest expense budget.
Can I make one,
Please.
just for clarification, these are the considerations that he has provided, not necessarily his recommendations?
Yes. Is that correct? Or, although I thought he said recommendation.
Yeah, so it is, the only clarification I would make is that I referenced the fire staffing issue. So I want to reiterate that the board may want to allocate all of those new spending dollars, as I'm calling them, toward fire staffing. But if you do not, then those would be the positions and the items that I would recommend.
Okay.
Based on partly what I've heard from the board in terms of your priorities, but also based on what I am hearing from the department heads and what I'm seeing from my own observations and judgments about where the priorities are in the departments.
I wanted to make that clarification so that it's clear, I think it's clear to us, but clear to our residents that these recommendations are coming based on the board's priorities and what we have discussed, not necessarily just what the acting town manager has decided would be beneficial for the town. That was the point I wanted to make.
Right, they are both, but I think we had requested of the town manager to look at the overall organizational structure and to get input, and that's, from my perspective, that's where the bullet number 1, assistant park superintendent, because we didn't really talk about that.
Right.
So I think we gave an awful lot of information to Mr. Johnson Staub. He gathered information internally and then wove this together. Am I correct?
You are correct, and if I could take an opportunity to just mention that, as you would expect, there are a lot of other needs in departments. You know, if we had more budget flexibility, I could certainly bring forward a lot of other needs from the departments that I would love to be able to advocate for. But, you know, the revenues are just not there.
One question that I didn't read carefully, and I don't know, I wonder if you could tell me off the top of your head, is there money in the budget that we can use to improve the town's website, or is that another item that we need to think about?
So we don't have, let's see, we have some ability to improve the website without money, you know, based just with what we can do ourselves, based on our contract with the website vendor. But if you mean to, you know, to completely redo the website and get a different website, no, we do not have that.
I'm just interested in improving functionality, and I understand that we did already use our one-time overhaul with this vendor, but is there still capacity to make significant improvements, or should we be budgeting for an outside consultant to come in and help us?
There is absolutely the ability to make significant improvements. Like everything else, you know, there are capacity issues. So, you know, the departments have the ability to put the content in and restructure the content. So it's a matter of how important is that work compared to all of their other work.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, there is the ability to improve it significantly without additional dollars.
Okay then.
Mr. Zelinski?
Just from a historical perspective,
Sure, sir.
this has been an ongoing challenge. I mean, the website has been upgraded several times in my 8.5-year tenure on the select board. And so it's an ongoing process of trying to continuously improve it, but there's always going to be bugs. I mean, you know, challenges, if you will, to using a website. And it depends on the individual person's skills and experience in terms of how you manage the use of any particular software package or app. So I think what you need to do is come up with specific suggestions, filter it through Peter, so the IT department can look at it and maybe come back and make a recommendation on what could be done. But just to throw out, the website needs to be changed. Well, I've heard that, 10 times in the last 8.5 years. Well, specifically, what is it? And then let the IT department come back and recommend to us just what's possible that they can do and what might be requiring an outside contractor or a whole new software package.
Well, I have been throwing out specifics over the years, but I don't see a lot of change, so that's why I'm asking if we need an overhaul.
Specifically in terms of
The search feature.
yeah.
Just keep talking about the search feature. That's the most important feature that's the least functional.
usability, it's not easy. Mr. Zelinski,
Well,
you had a question.
Well, he kind of threw me off topic here, but I just have a simple question, and it may be an easy one. Peter, the money and the monetary benefits that are already in the budget for people that aren't on staff or unfilled positions, where does that money go? Does it go collectively to one spot?
So at the end of the fiscal year, it closes out. So we approve a budget, and that means we have authority to spend $155 million, right? That's the total school and town budget. So that's, the school has authority to spend its share, and the town has authority to spend its share. And any money that's not spent by June 30th of that fiscal year, including vacant positions, where does that money go? It goes into the general fund, and then part of the year-end closeout process is to certify free cash.
So it's not held over
No.
in a spot where
No.
it helps enhance financial positions with new employees coming in?
Correct. Yeah, by law, the general fund appropriations all close out to general fund free cash at the end of the year.
So by not having all of these positions filled, it increases our free cash
Yes.
position?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So, if we were, sorry, maybe I'm skipping ahead.
No, go ahead. No, please.
So the recommendation of adding in 14 firefighters, we obviously cannot fit that into a budget and not fit that into the 2.5 increase every year. There's no way we would fit that in. That would have to be something like an override, if I'm understanding. So, if we decided that we wanted to hire these 14 positions, knowing we're not gonna spend the money in 2 years, that's 2 years worth of these 14 positions that would go into the general fund, and that's free cash. So we can basically already plan for that. Am I understanding that right?
Yes, I would just caveat a little bit. We will spend some of that money, over the 2-year period, more in the second year than in the first year. But generally, you're correct. We know that we're going to be putting money into the budget that we don't immediately need. I would also add part of the way that's going to play out is the wage dollars that are available for the fire department will cover the overtime deficit for those 2 years, and then some.
Okay. I do understand the need for planning ahead. It's difficult to process when I'm looking at the positions as of July 1, 2022, and there's 4 that are authorized but not hired. There's 2 vacant due to retirement. There's 2 that are not trained, and then a couple on medical and military leave, which we always want to account for those. But that's already 8 positions right there that we have open that we don't have filled. So I understand looking forward and putting those 14 positions in, but it seems incredibly unlikely that it's going to be 2 years before we backfill these, before we even touch the new 14. If it indeed takes 18 months to get somebody from start to shift ready. Am I making sense?
Yes, you are.
I think the reason the chief says we need the 14 is because he always has this type of attrition, and we'll never really get over it.
Revolving attrition.
Right. Which goes back to why I think that if we have 8, according to this as of August 27th, we have 8 positions open, and we add 14 more. By the time we fill these 8, it's going to take maybe 2 years. So then we'd have those 8 finally filled, but still not touching the money for the 14.
Right.
That's just what I'm having a difficult time
Me
wrapping my
too.
head around.
And where does that money sit?
And is it worth,
Right.
okay, so I don't know any other way to do this other than an override. So if we were to want to do that, so we're asking people to pay more money in your taxes, but we know we're not gonna actually use that money for the purpose that we're asking you to raise your taxes for at least 2 years. But we know we should do it so that we can be prepared in 2 years, but we can't, but we know we're gonna have to use that money for something else in the meantime.
That's why I asked
Right,
why there isn't
exactly.
why it's not there in reserve for that specific purpose going forward, being that was the request and the rationale behind it, but
Yeah.
it doesn't fit into where the child is.
Right, yeah, so that's just, that is where I'm wrapping my head
Understand
around.
that.
What I think we need to do,
This is working right now, though, is that certified free cash is funding, that's the revenue source for most of our capital budget.
what I suggest we do is continue, I think Mr. Johnson's job is soliciting dream budgets from departments, not dream budgets, but practical budgets going forward.
Did you say green or dream?
Dream.
You know,
Like a
what would they
wish
like
list.
to really
Oh.
see
I
their
just-
budget be
yeah.
at, so that they can function effectively going forward. We know we're in a new normal. What I'm leading to is, I think we need a big picture of what the real operating number is for this town, because I don't think it's really right now being funded at the level that it should be funded at.
Isn't
To
that
really
always the
operate.
question, though?
Well, so the reason I'm saying that is, once we have those numbers before us, I think we should have a joint meeting with the finance committee and put together a real plan to functionally manage this town at the level that it needs to be. Then we're gonna know if we were ready to go for an override and ask the voters to say, we figured it out, this is what it takes to run this town. It's not $8.60 per thousand, maybe it's $9.25, or who knows what the number is. It's not gonna be that much different, but it's gonna make a big difference to the operating ability of the town.
Or why that can't happen?
And so-
and adjust from there.
And so we're not ready yet for that big picture override, but I hope we are sometime soon. But what I'm hoping that we can do is find a way out of this year's budget, and that's why I keep going back to this thing with the meeting with the school committee, which should come first, and ask if there's any flexibility on using some of that $500,000 to create firefighter positions for this year, because we know we're short. We're not putting anything in the budget right now for this coming year for firefighters, which I have to admit, I just realized that right now. I thought we were going 3 a year.
I thought we were too.
Yeah.
Mention it, you know, the elephant in the room is the affordable housing issue. I mean, I think you have to recognize that that's a significant reason for the turnover in staff. I
Absolutely.
mean, when we hire staff these days, they mostly come from outside of the town. And, you know, that means that their family investment is in another town, you know, their loyalty to this town is different than somebody that lives in this town and feels a part of it, is committed to stay here and contribute to the town. You know, they have a more objective relationship to the town in terms of what their occupational opportunities are. You know, and then they could also ask themselves, well, what's the likelihood that I'm going to be promoted up through the ranks, you know? Well, I mean, and then that, of course, the transportation costs are an issue there as well. So I think it's a big factor. This town, I think, is significantly different in terms of its culture than it was 30 years ago when I moved here, because people don't necessarily expect to stay here. And they're being displaced by, you know, money coming in from outside. They're buying second and third homes, or turning them into business properties because they can Airbnb them and basically get all of the money out and more of what they're actually investing in that property.
It's a very good point, Mr. Brown. Yours was too about affordable housing, but you can't say the word affordable housing without recognizing the significance of what it's going to take out of the school system. So you can't take money away from the school system and then say we need more affordable housing that's going to add more people with the workforce here. I think it's, in my personal opinion, monies that are there and secured, and we have a venue to keep them there. We should concentrate, personally, I think we should concentrate on other avenues of that money generation, which is a good point. and leave something that's working in place. That's just my personal opinion.
I'm only suggesting it for this year until we get the comprehensive plan, ask the voters for their support for an operating budget that's sustainable. It's just a one-year request. They're lucky this year with the extra $1.5 million. I keep saying it. It's just a one-time request for consideration.
I think the superintendent has signaled that that money has been earmarked.
Well, she's saying it's not likely. Who wants to give up money out of a budget? Nobody does. But I think if we have a thoughtful discussion with the school committee, maybe it's something that can be worked on. Maybe some of it.
I personally don't think that we should be looking at that as a revenue source.
All right, well, we're going to have to figure out where the money's going to come from.
We have committed that to the school department, and I don't think it's right or reasonable to go back and say, can you, for 1 year, give it back? I don't see that happening.
And I think I think the board supports your view. I'm just.
We wouldn't consider Doug's question at all. Guys, we're waving our arms. It's just money, just a number right now. I think it's perfectly legitimate for us to ask the superintendent to come and tell us, how are you going to invest that money so that we feel comfortable that the money that we're allocating to you is going to be spent wisely and for good purposes. I fully expect that the mental health issues due to the pandemic are huge, that are handicapping the ability for our students to learn. But I want to hear that from her. And if that's where she's investing the money, I feel much more comfortable about it.
Do we have to be comfortable with it though?
Right.
No, I mean, really, is that within our purview to tell the school what to do with their budget?
No, not at all.
Right.
But it is in our purview to ask them if there's a conversation that can be had.
Yeah, I just think those are two different things. It's like, if they say we're gonna do whatever with the money, I don't think that's within our purview. But I'm not saying that doesn't mean that you couldn't have a conversation about what the option would be for us to tap into some of that money.
For this year only, until we get ourselves organized.
Yeah,
but again, then my concern is if they do say this year you can have 200,000 because we actually only really need 3, then that means in FY25 budget we are going to have to guarantee that 200,000 because we have now put those positions in for firefighters.
Well, maybe by then we'll have the Safer Grant program as an option. Maybe by then we'll know we're going to have some new revenue. Maybe we're going to have some solar fields
But
coming
maybe
online.
not. Doug.
Maybe
right,
not.
right. But
yeah.
I think it is really awful to say to the superintendent of schools, you have to justify this money that we have promised you. That is.
I would never phrase it that way.
I just heard from Mr. Pat.
I'm sorry, but as a representative of the citizens of this town, everybody's accountable for how that money is being invested.
Yes,
and I don't think I'm asking too much. She's a public servant. She needs to be accountable to the public. Listen, I'm a retired teacher. I fully understand the complexity of educating children and motivating them and taking care of their various personal issues, and not to mention family issues. Very complicated, and I value the benefit. I am really impressed with our school system and how effective they are in raising the achievement of students and preparing them for adult life, and therefore hopefully they can come back into the town and help us benefit from the quality that they offer us. But this is a process that is a public process, and we're feeding money into that system, and we have every right on behalf of our citizens to ask them to come in and explain to us how's that money being invested.
And she justifies her budget to her board. And if we ever want to know how she's investing her money in terms of taking care of kids and where the increases needs to be assigned, we can go to her meetings, we can have a joint meeting with them, but I will not support just saying she needs to justify to the select board. She has a board that she reports to, and we have our finance department has had a lot of input into her budget and how it works and where money is going.
I hear you and I agree with you, but from a public relations standpoint, I think it's in her own best interest.
And she can do it at a school committee meeting. That's where she justifies her budget.
The money's being invested.
At a school committee meeting. They oversee what she does and how she spends money.
Just the undefined security issues in the environment we live in right now determines some kind of latitude financially that the schools should have. And I think taking that ability away financially from them with things that may come up that money needs to be.
And keep in mind,
We live in a different world than maybe
in
when you're a
mind,
teacher.
we also have 2 members of the finance committee who have the school committee as a subcommittee. They know every single piece. It's no secret. There's no secret to it.
I'm not suggesting that there is a secret to it or that it's being mishandled. But we allocated $500,000 on an annual basis to the schools. We have a right to at least ask, how was that money invested?
We can also look at how it's being invested for affordable housing and what the affordable housing account has right now and how that's being used. So, I mean, you can look at it in a lot of different ways. We can have them come in and say, here's what we're doing. I mean,
Okay.
I just think we're out of line and I think we're out of our purview.
So then, if I could ask a new question, I guess back to the basic question. We are going into constructing a new fire station. We have a 6-station policy. We don't have enough firefighters and none in the budget. So where's the money gonna come from if we wanna put any firefighters in the budget for this year?
Great question. And that's one of the things we have to be talking about right now.
Because we're asking the fire union to go to 16. I think they're looking to us to support ongoing staffing of the fire station.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we spent, what was it, 1.6 million in overtime last year. Remember when you brought that up? How much of that, the fire staffing increase, will eliminate that time and a half or double the time? How much of that will be absorbed by the reduction in overtime budget?
So we spent 1.3 million last year, 1.6 was the year before.
Right.
And we are talking about increasing the number of firefighters on duty every day. I would not expect a significant reduction in overtime with
So
the
we'll
hiring.
still have a large element of overtime even though we're fully staffed?
That's
How-
correct. Because, right, so we have X number of firefighters now, and we have, we're budgeting, we're trying to staff at 16, but some shifts we don't, right, because it's not mandatory. And we're talking about a slight adjustment where we go from 16 voluntary to 16 mandatory. So that's gonna up the overtime a little bit. And then, but the bigger issue is, we're talking about going to 18 firefighters at the start of shift from 16. That's a huge addition to the staffing levels. And the union is going to want us to staff on a voluntary basis above 18.
But if you're backfilling those positions that you can't with forced overtime now, how can the number continue to, the overtime number continue to grow if you've increased your staffing?
So, yeah, so there may be some relief for the overtime budget to the extent that we have current vacancies at the current staffing targets. So when those vacancies are, you know, I think our churn rate, the chief and I have talked about, you know, on average, we're probably going to be seeing anywhere between 2 to 4 firefighters leaving every year just because of demographics and the size of our fire department. But right now, we still have more than that because we've been adding and adding and adding. So when those settle out, yeah, that will reduce the overtime somewhat. But again, we're talking about...
But what is the percentage of the number? We're talking about how to pay for them. So there has to be a number that's either saved or expended, right? By doing this, that was part of the hook when we talked about adding firefighters, was that it was going to decrease the demand for forced overtime, correct?
Eventually.
Eventually.
Right.
But there's still money in the budget right now, isn't there, for firefighters that aren't on staff?
Well, but, so we...
For this year, you're talking about right now, so where's that money?
The vacancies.
You know what I'm saying? They've
I
already
do.
been budgeted.
Yeah.
So between that portion of what we're not using that's already budgeted and what we're gonna decrease from the forced overtime fund, I'd just like to know what that number is to answer Mr. Brown's question for the immediate issue. Is that unreasonable? Or am
Well, I think
off
you're
base?
talking about the attrition number.
I'm talking about staffing and you saying we afford the people that we have working and the added fire department members coming on, right? Well, there's money that we're not spending out of the budget on them now, and there is more money that we're spending on the overtime, forced overtime because of the staffing issues. There's got to be a number that by not requesting overtime, by having staffing numbers in place, right? You're going to gain some money off what you're spending in forced overtime. But you
I see
said
where you're saying plan for less overtime and budget more
because
full-time.
by 50%, if you're getting paid time and a half, that's 50% of that number.
But at the same time, even if we put 3 more in the budget for this year, we're not gonna put them online right away.
But we don't have
We're
guys
still
at the
gonna
budget
have-
now.
I know that, but we're still gonna have the overtime.
Scott, don't forget, you're not paying all the benefits that go along with that individual employee. And so there is a reduction. So when you say it's time and a half, it's not really.
Well, it's still more
1.5
than
times the cost, but
there is a
a
rate.
To your point, I'm not disagreeing with you, but remember that what doesn't get spent at the end of that fiscal year becomes certified free cash.
Mr. Brown, you were right in the middle of something. I'm
Sorry.
Well,
No,
I was just saying
wanna
that,
make
I
him
just
finish
feel like
his
that
comment.
even if we put the 3 in the budget, I don't know if we're gonna be able to figure it out, but even if we do, we're still gonna be struggling with overtime. So to take it out of the overtime, I think we're just kidding ourselves because it's still gonna be happening over the course of the next couple of years until we get staffed up.
So what we're saying is, whether we put three people in or not, we're still gonna have the same problem we're trying to alleviate right now by adding 3.
Because we're talking
No
about
matter
going,
what.
because we're talking about going to 16 and possibly 18 is
You're talking about in
this year.
this year.
Right.
I'm talking about what happens once everything levels out.
Oh, okay, well, that's a different story.
Well, yeah, but we're talking about the money you're looking for to staff 3 that we can't staff now this year anyway because of,
I'm just
but
saying
that money's still in the budget.
I'm just saying we need to have this ongoing commitment for hiring every year. There's gotta be at least 3 in the budget every year if we're ever gonna get on target to be staffed, unless we go with some massive hiring initiative, which could be rolled into an override that does the operating budget of the town. I don't wanna just do another single firefighter override because the town residents are gonna be like, are you kidding me? You just
Well,
did that?
not if we're gonna have this same argument of you're gonna have massive overtime that exceeds our overtime budget.
Well, I don't want that to be forever either, but I mean, I think it's practical for the next couple of years that we're gonna have to have some more overtime than we want. to
Because
get-
it was
till we
certainly
get
my
that
thinking that by increasing staffing, we were gonna eliminate overtime
at some point.
and increase morale and fully staff the fire departments we had. But it's hard to sell that argument to people that are paying taxes that no matter what we do, we're gonna take some more of your money, but it's not gonna make a difference.
Well, it is gonna make a difference.
That's where
in
I wanna know what that number is.
Mhm.
I wanna be able, or at least get close to, what are we saving, what are we gaining, what are we losing by doing this?
Mhm.
So you can explain to your constituency why you're doing it.
Right.
That's all I'm looking for.
There's also a element of morale in the available overtime. There's sometimes disappointment when there's not enough overtime available. So we don't want that to be ultimately completely eliminated, but we do wanna reduce it, I agree.
Mr. Johnson-Stott? Mr. Johnson-Stott, go ahead.
Yeah, so I want to try again to provide a little bit more response to Scott. I don't know that I'm going to be able to, give you the number that you're looking for, but so because there are a lot of different issues and some moving goalposts, right? So right now we have, as you know, 14 minimum start of shift and 16 is the goal. So when we added that, and that was the goal last year, FY22, and that's the goal this year, FY23. So when we added 3 new positions to the FY23 budget, if those goals, those policies remain fixed, right? We're still at 14 and 16, but we added new positions, then absolutely overtime's going to go down. But we're now talking about an override to hire 14 firefighters so that we can not reduce overtime at 14 and 16, but that so we can increase our staffing levels to 18 minimum start of shift. And again, I really wanted, I don't want to promise the voters a reduction in overtime, because as a practical matter, if whatever your minimum start of shift is, so again, for the public, that means the chief has the authority to force someone to remain on duty after a 24-hour shift. Whatever that number is, the fire union is going to ask us to, on a voluntary basis, plan for 1, 2, or 3 more than the minimum. And the reason for that is because they want to reduce the forced overtime and be able to sign up for the overtime and work it on a voluntary basis. To reduce, does that make sense?
Well, I mean, if you're fully staffed, you're going to eliminate the need for overtime unless guys want time off, right?
Except that I think you always have to have a little wiggle room for people calling in sick.
I understand a little bit of wiggle room,
Yeah.
but this sounds like more of a quotient on planned overtime in the future.
It's sort of a side benefit for the younger guys to make a little extra money.
Well,
And-
let's
and
say
they
that out
do-
loud then.
Pardon me?
Let's say that out loud. I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
Because he's saying no.
Yes and no. It certainly, firefighters, there are a lot of firefighters that like to make overtime. But whether they like it or not, unless we dramatically increase our staffing levels above what we're talking about, we're still going to need a lot of overtime.
It never really goes away with the fire department, right?
You'd have to, if you wanted to have 18 firefighters at the start of shift and not have a lot of overtime, then we're not hiring 14, we're hiring, 28, 32. There's a lot of overtime built into the system, and it's not the number that we're at right now in terms of the budgeted positions, even assuming that most of our vacancies are filled and we've only got maybe 2 or 3 vacant because of that churn rate. If we're at 18 start of shift, well, right now, our staffing levels right now, it's about 4. 4 are allowed to be out on vacation on any one day.
Listen, I get
So it's a big number over and above the budget.
So help me to understand this. So if we go to 18, say, and given the struggles of trying to get them in now, you budget for 18, you do your override, and you still can't fill that position. So that money that was supposed to go to their salaries, and you still can't get the full staffing, that money gets liquidated, goes down to certified free cash at the end of the year.
Well, maybe there's an important clarification. It can be used for overtime. The wage money within the fiscal year, you had asked before, can we carry the money over to another fiscal year? The answer is no. But can we take unspent salary money and use it for overtime? Absolutely.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Any thoughts on new revenue?
Your charging idea with the solar and the charge, maybe
Yeah.
we can make up the difference on 20-minute
I'm
charges.
really hopeful for that, but I don't think it's going to be ready this
Right,
It's
year.
not gonna be
right.
tomorrow. So I want to go back to something Mr. Brown said in terms of, do we actually have enough information to make these decisions today? Did I hear you correctly on that?
I did say that.
Okay. So I guess
Unless we have to, it's
but
budget
that's,
crunch time.
well, that was what I was that's where I was going next, where we have your comment, which is valid, and I need to know from Mr. Johnson's job what he needs from us today.
So in terms of the big question on the fire staffing, I don't need an answer today. I don't. The main thing that I needed for today is priorities within the levy limit. But even that, we know what the level service budgets are.
Mm-hmm.
I need to submit my proposed budget to you in December. So, in terms of the capacity that I have to add some positions within the budget, there's still some time. But if there is going to be consideration of if the board is going to continue its current policy to get to staffing 6 stations as soon as possible, then you're going to want to move on 14 firefighters quickly, which means either a big cut to the budget, and I'm going to need to know that soon, or an override, and that you would, I believe, want to engage the finance committee in and the community in. So I don't need an answer on it. If we're talking about an override, the hard date is January to put it on the town meeting warrant.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think the board wants to, before you make a decision on an override of that magnitude, you want to have some dialogue with the finance committee and some community engagement.
We would need a joint meeting with the finance committee,
I would
absolutely
support
correct.
that, too.
And if I remember what Mr. Brown said, your thought would also be looking at anything else we would want to roll into said potential override.
Exactly.
So it would not be.
So it's a comprehensive plan that we can get behind and know it's really the right number.
Because
And then it's not just the fire department.
It wouldn't just be the,
I'm sorry.
no, it's fine, because
Go
I'm
for it.
looking at, again, this presentation from August, impact of average single-family bill, obviously is an estimate around $75. So that is for the 14 firefighters. Again, this is just rough estimates as of now. So in thinking about what you said, is if we look and we see adding $5 more means that we can add X, Y, Z things that we think are really important to maintaining our town, then we want to be able to include that as part of why we want to do the override.
And explain what it is, exactly.
And being prepared for the request.
Right.
Okay.
And we really have to be, from my perspective, really clear and really focused on what the scope of an override is,
Exactly.
right? So that if it's gonna include 14 firefighters and it's going to include other things that the board has determined are necessary, then we need to be really, really clear about that, and we need to be able to explain that.
And we need to be careful that we're not overdoing it.
Yes.
And asking for things that are not really essential.
Right.
And
Right.
I just want to throw out one last thing about the firefighter staffing issue. I want us to consider, not to vote today, but whether or not we want to make a clear commitment to keep the West Falmouth station open when the new station is built, and whether or not that means later we might consider a vote to say that that station will be staffed with voluntary overtime, like what we've been doing to West Falmouth, because that's the new venture. So I'm not asking for any decisions right now, but I'm just saying throw it out there.
And if you're gonna make it.
I'm unclear,
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm unclear, which
saying that-
station staffed with voluntary?
The new Hatchville station.
I hear what you're saying.
Because
Okay.
I think that would be more likely a draw for young volunteers to want to be at the new station and say, yeah, I'll volunteer over there.
So you're saying that it wouldn't always be West Falmouth that
Correct.
takes the hit?
Yes.
I just want to understand, okay.
And Mr. Patterson's assertion that, which I agree with, that at some point the West Falmouth station is going to become obsolete. There may be monies needed to upfit that if they were going to keep that as a station as well in the future,
I
to
agree.
be able to support the new and upgraded apparatus that we need. So that's certainly something to think about down the line.
Exactly, because I think for too long, it's been kind of assumed that that station was going to be closing.
Yeah.
So there's been a lack of investment in that station. If it's going to stay in that location, we might need to consider whether or not an ambulance bay is added, or, you know, some other.
Height and length restriction, I mean, additions to it
Yeah.
to support a regular ladder
Because we're not
truck.
going to continue to find little old fire trucks like we got lucky
Right.
with. You know, it took a
That's
year to
it.
find that.
That site property limits you as to what you can do to expand that facility. Don't forget, you're talking about property now. It's sandwiched in there and very limited in ability to expand. I mean, we've dug out the floor, we've raised the top of the entry bay there, but you're not going to put another extension to that building.
You could easily add a bay on the side if you took down that tree.
Right, and a longer bay and cut into where the guys are parking.
I'm not saying easily. I shouldn't say easily, but
Cost-effective way to do it. I mean, I think you need to say, let's take a look at the run data and the usage data. You know, once you get the Hatchville station in, and you're looking at building a northwest station, then you make the decision. I think
We're
it's
certainly
way too
down the
early
line.
to be making that decision, Doug, quite honestly.
yeah. Well, we're not making that decision. We're just identifying that,
Future
as Mr.
consideration.
Zelinski said, that station has been underinvested in for quite some time.
That's true.
Gotcha.
Yes,
What's next?
Can I ask?
yes.
If I'm understanding our options, we would likely, if we're going to consider hiring more firefighters, are we interested in not having these 4 other identified positions or increases and having 3 and then potentially doing an override, or just adding 3, or doing the override and these 4 positions? I think we have multiple options that we need to decide which ones are we leaning towards, so that Mr. Johnson's staff can put that together for us.
I'm in, if I can speak. I'm inclined to stay with the priorities that have been identified with the sustainability director, DEI officer. All of these are things that the public has asked us for and we've agreed on, so I don't want to backtrack that. I think we're going to leave here today without doing anything about the fire staffing issue, but we know it's right in front of us, and I think we need to come up with a way to deal with that separately. I don't really want to change these.
Doesn't that kind of force you into a position by doing that, though?
It does.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Yes.
I'll admit that.
So, I guess that was my question too. Can we do this piecemeal? Can we separate out the fire department requests and deal with that as a separate issue and push forward these 3 or 4 suggestions by Mr. Johnson's job, push those forward and deal with this separately?
I'd like to do that.
And in dealing with this separately, we would engage the finance committee. However, the issue with that is, if we do this and say, go ahead, put this in the budget, move it forward, and we don't get any traction on this, then nothing happens.
Because that's fluid, that's continuing to evolve right now. This
Right.
is it.
But
This
if,
is something we have to-
right, but if we don't do this now in planning,
Right, no,
then it's
right.
gonna be
Well,
a
that's why I
problem.
said, we don't want to
So-
we don't want to be forced into a
That's
position
what
that you
I'm
have to make
concerned about.
without consideration.
I
Right.
think we're going to be forced into action of some sort anyway, but I don't want to change what we've already agreed on just because we're in a box. I think there's going to be a way. We'll figure it out.
Mr. Johnson's done.
Yeah, I may be, my request in terms of feedback for today may be evolving, but let me say that it's not difficult for me to put together a budget and have a placeholder of $350,000, hold that revenue in reserve for whatever purposes you ultimately decide on. And I say that because it might be a good idea to be able to go to the finance committee with some different levers and different options.
Mm-hmm.
So if the finance committee is, potentially interested in an override, but they really don't want, they want to look at all of the possible ways it could be reduced in size from 14 to some smaller number, to be able to say, well, here's this other piece that, we have other things we want to do with it, but it is in play. It's just a thought. You have some more, as far as direction for me,
Okay.
you have some more time.
So I guess I want to hear from the board that, and I think I'm hearing it, but I'm not sure. I'm hearing that the pieces that Mr. Johnson's job submitted to us based on our priorities, we're not really all that willing to budge on, correct?
That's my feeling.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure. And moving forward, we're not really willing to budge on this either, as we plan based on our policy, based on what the chief is looking at.
We're gonna have to get some new revenue. Our budget has got to expand too.
Right, but what I'm saying is, before we go there, Mr. Brown, I just want to hear from the board that this is equally a priority as well.
It is for me.
Okay.
Even though maybe doesn't seem like it because I'm sticking with the sustainability director, the
Mhm.
DEI, and our other objectives that we've identified, the fire staffing is paramount.
Okay.
But at least we're putting it in its own place to deal with.
But let me finish. So all of these are a priority. Within the level service budget, we can afford the pieces that came up on your memo, right? That the board has agreed on, not just Mr. Brown, but every one of us has agreed that sustainability, DEI, we need to move forward with those. Okay. So when, in a presentation to the FinCom, it would be, we have the money to cover those. However, the board is also committed to the plan of the fire chief. And we are looking at ways to pay for that. And we're coming to you as a joint meeting to figure out how we're gonna do that. Am I hearing you? Okay.
Yes.
I just wanna make sure that what's being represented, that every board member agrees that that's the way we need to move forward.
Oh, because this is in stone, this is still needs a level of creativity to it.
Right. So we can do this, we wanna do this, we need your help figuring out how to do it.
Right.
Exactly.
Am I correct?
Right.
Okay, So is that enough direction for you, Mr. Johnson's job, moving forward? And how the board is gonna direct you?
Yes.
Okay, so for me, we did what we started, what our goal was to do today.
I think so.
We
And then
agreed
some.
on we agreed on the strategic plan, we can make a couple of changes, we'll bring that forward in the public meeting, and we'll vote on it, and we're being very, very clear about what our priorities are moving forward. It's just that there's a piece of it that we need help figuring out how to fund.
Financially.
Right, exactly. All right, so I think that gives you really clear direction.
Do we need any votes, or
Yeah, do we have to make a is that in the form of a motion?
that we adopt this suggested budget as planned, and then figure out the fire staffing at a later date?
I don't know that we need a vote on it. I think we've.
I'm pretty clear on the direction.
I think
Okay.
we've given direction. I guess for me, the biggest piece for me was making sure that all board members were on board with how we were moving forward.
Sound right, Sam?
Absolutely.
Mr. Patterson?
Yeah, I'm fine with
Good.
Okay.
And so the
that. And I think,
assistant,
making sure that we have the revenue to pay for it, how it's gonna be paid for, needs to be addressed. And we'll see
Exactly.
where we go from here, and it may be dependent on the town referendum.
Right.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Patterson.
and the assistant parks position, that's the one, there are two elements in my proposal that did not come directly from the board and the community.
Mhm.
And that was the increase in hours for the East Falmouth Library
Mhm.
and the assistant park superintendent position. So at the moment, those are in. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Yes.
And I will put that together. And I do want to say again that, this is all very early in the budgeting process. It's possible that as I have more information after getting the requests and adding up all the numbers and having updated revenue estimates, that this number for new spending, 300, 350, it could go a little down or it could go a little up.
Mhm.
But that's our goal, that's our plan for now. And I do just, again, want to caveat that this is very early in the revenue setting process, so there are still a lot of moving pieces with the FY24 budget.
And I would expect that you would update the board as you move forward in figuring it out. As things change or shift, I'd like us to know each step of the way. But I think we have a plan moving forward. I think we've given you direction on where we want to go. And is there anything else that we need to consider from the board?
I think it was a very successful and open meeting today. I think we got a lot done today.
I agree.
We didn't solve them all, but we talked
No,
about
no, but I mean,
No,
at
but
least
we
we
got a way
identified
forward.
paths forward on them.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, and it was a spirited discussion, and I think that's how we work as a group and how we come to a decision and consensus.
it. Very good.
And I will, unless anyone has any other comments, concerns, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Bye, Sam.
Thank you. Bye.